Hey everyone, welcome to, I don't even know what the title is. You're just going to let your customers churn. I get very angry when there are boring titles for events. So thank you for coming here. We will be talking about retention. We have a all-star panel and
all-star audience too.
All-star audience. There it is, Nick. See, you're
yeah, I'm looking at some of the names here. We got Shopify in here. We got True Classic Tees. We've got Brittany in here. We've got Courtney in here. Dylan, Julia, Kat.
I was going to say Dylan. I feel like I talked to you guys when I was at Passport years ago and you were just kicking off.
We got half days in here.
I like it.
I just signed my docs to invest in half days. We've got gold in here.
I love it. So here's the deal with this roundtable. This is not going to be a presentation. Yao's not going to talk the Malomo book. Amanda's not just going to talk about the stable, right? Like we're going to hopefully be answering all the questions that you have in mind about retention. Please add questions in chat. We will reply hopefully in real time, maybe just in chat. And this is going to be much more of a conversation than anything. And I'm just going to kick it off by asking everybody to introduce themselves. And I'm just going to go in a circle, and then I'll bring you some hard-hitting questions. But Kyle, do you mind starting? And then Yao, you'll be up next. Just who you are, your background. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle Hensey. I'm the co-founder and former CEO at Chubby's. Also one of the co-founders of Loop. So really excited to be here with you all. Been in this kind of wild e-com infrastructure space for the last 12 years. Makes me feel old. Got a little bit of gray here in the beard as a result, as you can imagine, but really excited to be here with you all.
All right, Yao, you're up, and then Amanda.
All right. Yeah, not as much gray as Aaron though, so you should still feel very young. Aaron, what do you know? Like 60? I don't even know anymore.
Age is a number.
Age is a state of mind. You're right. Yao Inning, co-founder and CEO at Malomo. Prior to Malomo, ran a consulting agency, worked a ton in the direct-to-consumer space, building a lot of platforms to help people manage customer experience. And the concept for Malomo came out of our agency. So very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks for all the compliments too. I appreciate it. Amanda, you're up, and then Nick, you'll bring us home.
Hi there, Amanda Masello. I'm Director of D2C Strategy at The Stable. In my group, we work with clients to launch new sites, redesign, or grow revenue for an existing business on Shopify Plus. My background, I started in digital at an agency and spent a number of years at Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and then went inside and was head of direct-to-consumer on a brand operating on Shopify and Amazon, and then came full circle back to agency life.
Love it. Thank you. Mr. Sharma.
That is what my lawyer calls me. I'm Nick. I run a company called Sharma Brands, and we basically help brands launch and scale and plug in with all the right tech. We have a few other companies too. We do customer acquisition for a lot of brands at scale. We make landing pages for brands at scale. And overall, I'm just probably one of the biggest nerds in e-commerce. So I love nerding it up with my fellow nerds here.
And somebody's calling you a ram. They might mean goat, but it's unclear. I think of you as a multi-hyphenate in e-commerce, so I'm glad you're here, man. Really appreciate you bringing all the different perspectives that each of you have from your backgrounds. I'm Aaron. I'm Loop's president and current head of product. And background, started a D2C brand in 2010, which is where most of the gray came from. My two daughters brought the rest of the gray, and then started a company called Passport that does international shipping for D2C. And I've kind of been on the commerce tech side since 2017 or so.
I didn't know you started Passport.
Mm-hmm. Co-founded with Alex.
Damn. I love Passport.
Most of the grays went away because that's doing well. So it's like, it's a choice. So we're going to start off, and we're not going to talk specifically about retention. I kind of want to get a state of the world. And Kyle, I want to start with you. And I was thinking you can maybe talk a little bit about different stages at Chubby's, even through solo, but I'll let you take this where you want, about we always talk about how the world has changed and how that changes the mind of a D2C operator from, pre-pandemic going into the pandemic. You guys were obviously scaling quickly, freight issues, logistics issues, market falls apart, etc. So take that where you want, but I'm curious like how the world has changed and where maybe you can end with a little bit about retention right now and why that might matter.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and even if you just look at the last 10 years, let's call it the last 10 years in brand building in D2C, I think of that first 3 to 5 years as very much revenue market share oriented, build great products, take them to market, get out there, be disruptive. At least in Chubby's land, starting, call it 3 to 5 years ago, we really shifted gears into profitability, figuring out how to scale these things. And like doing the hard work and making sure the foundation was right. And it's been really cool by virtue of COVID hitting, accelerating ecom, and then now, kind of hitting what is feeling like maybe some consumer discretionary softness, really focusing people on, again, growth, and then now again, operating. Yeah, I think brands are finding themselves in a unique situation. And this has been true for Chubby's over the last 5 years. We've been very focused on profitability and operating in scalable ways, but I think all brands are being forced to do it now, right? And I'm sure some of y'all are seeing this from brands where you're not going to get there if you're just being disruptive and driving market share. You also have to build a sustainable business. And, the way we talked about it internally was that if digital is going to be our core business for the life of what we're doing, we have to figure out how to make our core business work profitably. And so I just think, uniquely, if you open up that as your target, I actually think you can be more creative in the way that you operate. I look at the revenue at all costs mindset is quite limiting in many ways. And so, I think figuring out the right tools, figuring out the right partners, frankly, just focusing your team on how to scale profitably is like really hard, but really rewarding when you get it right. And I think that's the mindset for merchants today.
If you were, and sorry to put you on the spot here, but like if you were to think about like a metric that a growth at all costs brand takes versus like maybe something when you say, hey, let's hit sustainable growth or let's focus on profitability, like yes, profitability is a metric, but like what is something that's maybe like non-obvious that you think a brand might be missing or that you guys started paying attention to when you made that shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, retention, right? Repeat sales, like the single biggest revenue and business driving lever you have that can drive real profits.
And when you think about repeat, was that like 14 days, 90 days, 180 days? Like,
boy, we looked at them all, and I think it's really specific to brand.
Yep.
I think with a lot of the platforms losing visibility, we naturally pulled our windows tighter,
yep.
just assuming that we were losing some visibility. But I also think having the financial means to push that out on the horizon can be really financially lucrative over time. So yeah, I really don't think there's a great cookie cutter answer to that. You really have to assess, what are your financial means?
Yep.
What stage is your brand in? You might be in the market share grab land, and that might be the right strategic thing. But I think for the vast majority of brands, it's going to make sense to build sustainably from day one and focus on that. I
love it. Thank you. And then obviously, like anybody, I'll be asking you each questions right now, but if there's something that Kyle said that you want to jump in on, please do. But Amanda, I want to turn to you just quickly and think about maybe how conversations have changed for your customers, maybe in the last year, right? Like growth, market falls off. What are you guys focused on right now?
Yeah, well, and Kyle alluded to this, acquisitions becoming more challenging because of changes in privacy and tracking capabilities, and it's also become a lot more expensive. As Kyle mentioned, it's similar kind of across the brand portfolio. We've seen an increased focus on retention and lifetime value. And this is kind of manifested in a couple of ways. I mean, there's even more focus on doubling down on making sure that the Shopify or what have you on the brand website is optimized for conversion, but also that the targeting funnels are performing as effectively as possible headed into holiday to make sure that consumers are still interested and are incentivized to spend. And there's an increased focus on capturing zero and first-party data as well, given that lack of tracking, right? So how can you capture that that data on your own brand website in unique and engaging ways. And so we've been spending a lot of time there with our clients.
That's awesome. I want to start this with you and then open up to others, like to the zero and first party data question, or, you know, your comment about like changes in privacy and tracking. What are some of the tools that you're recommending? What have you seen work, or what are some of the early, like startups, big companies, whatever it is that you're exploring, recommending to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, there one thing that had been trending over the past few years, but continues to give interest is like things like quizzes and kind of guided selling that can look really different depending on the brand, and the vertical. Text messaging. We've lost email tracking. Also, email, as we all know, we've got cluttered inboxes, so SMS can help break through, and you can do a lot of the things that you can do in email with segmentation and personalization, and then just like driving urgency. So those are some of the big ones.
Thank you. Before we move on, Nick, Kyle, Yao, any other tools that you guys have seen like to kind of combat, frankly, like the rising cost of acquisition, whether it's around kind of creating zero-party data? We could also just put stuff in chat, and anybody in the audience, if you have tools that you recommend, please do. But Nick, I want to create space for you to start.
I would say tools wise, I think there's a few things. Like Klaviyo is probably the easiest, most universal tool that everybody already uses, where you can really take advantage of the segmenting capabilities. There's also Octane, which has done a good job kind of like talking about zero-party data, and their quizzes do a good job of being able to add tags and attributes to different Klaviyo profiles. That's probably the easiest way to get started. I mean, for like longweekend.com, for example, when you fill out your email in the footer, we ask you a question before you hit submit of like why you're coming to the brand. And that's a super easy example too of how to start collecting zero-party data. I think of zero-party data as the adjective to the first-party data. So like zero-party data is the adjective, first-party data is the noun. And, generally I think there's like, you can use software to collect it. If you're smart about how you use UTMs with your paid traffic, you can also collect zero-party data that way. If a customer comes in through a specific newsletter, or they come in through a specific influencer, like that's all very important information. And, I think the other advantage of zero-party data, the one that everybody talks about now, is focused on customer acquisition. But the second one that's really important is, in 6 months, you can look back and say, okay, all our customers that have X in common, what's their retention like as a whole, or how do they react to sales, or how do they compare with like sales that are discount focused versus, giving 10% to charity. But yeah, I mean, I think zero-party data has always been important. I think now it's becoming more talked about, given that we don't have access to all the attributes through channels like Facebook anymore.
That's helpful. Thank you. Kyle, anything you want to add? Any other tools? I'm putting some in the chat, by the way. We don't need to like go through everyone, but
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm hearing a lot more of companies using product review data in this manner as well, which is kind of like an uncommon thing to think about, of like, what are customers actually saying about the product that might give insights into what their preferences are, what they care about, that you can kind of like extract and then put back into your marketing funnel. But that's the one that kind of jumped to mind that maybe isn't as obvious.
Yeah, I mean, the other one is less tools based, but more just mindset and how you're building your team. I mean, don't forget about all the free channels that you have, right? And we're kind of breezing over email. Yeah, of course, it's been around for forever, but man, if you've done the blocking and tackling every day since you started what you started, you could have an amazing asset there. I agree with SMS. We rolled that out as well. But like, are you doing everything you can do to grow your community, right? Just getting engaged eyeballs on what you're doing, I think, is really important. And doing the blocking and tackling when times are good, so that if acquisition gets tight, you still have that community, or you have the lists, the text list or the email list, et cetera, that's engaged and loves what you're doing.
I love it. So Nick, I want to kind of go back to like kind of some of the intro question and like a little bit of what Kyle said, a little bit of what Amanda said. Again, from whatever perspective you want to bring, like operator, investor, advisor, whatever. What are you seeing as some of the changes, maybe more recently in the last 6 months? And like, what do you? I run a D2C brand. I come to you. I'm like, hey, it's gotten very expensive for me to acquire customers. What should I do? Like, how do you even walk me through the decision-making criteria before you get to an answer? Yeah.
I would say there's a few things we look at. So like, first I look at, like what is the product, right? A lot of times it's either a product that's already in a very competitive space. Like if you're starting a candle brand, you're going to be the 48,000th candle brand to exist on the internet. Versus if you're half days, you might be one of like a dozen brands that do that thing, right? So one is like, what's the uniqueness? And depending on that, you can decide, half days is one of one. You can decide, how to acquire customers. Or how to acquire customers efficiently and effectively. So, but I think the fundamental thing that we've seen with all of our brands that haven't been hit with the iOS 14 impact, it's the brands that have built a great foundation as a brand, not just a product that they're selling and not just operating that lower funnel and making sure that they're using Rebuy in their cart and Malomo for order tracking and, super fast website. Like it's got to have a brand. It's got to have the purpose. It's got to have the excitement that attracts consumers in the first place to even want to shop there. Those are the brands that have been less affected. Then there's other brands, like we have a brand that will do well over 100 million this year. Not really that much of a brand. It's a big retail brand. And, probably 30-40% of that is online. And that's an opportunity, I think, where we can say, okay, well, you've got so much social proof. We can figure out how to build something out of this or tell the stories out of this that make it more exciting. But generally, I think like even like brands that have just launched, there's got to be some reason or some story or some angle that people have to get excited about. Otherwise, it's just like content. You could have the greatest piece of content. If you don't have the right eyeballs, if you don't have the right hook to get somebody in, you're just not going to get somebody to watch it through.
I love it. Thank you. I'm mindful of some of the questions in chat, and I might come back to those, though I want to fit in community and loyalty within a little bit of a flow. So before we get there, Yao, I kind of want to let you talk a little bit about Malomo, but also like kind of tracking in general and maybe like tech provider in general. And I'll try to chime in as well. Like how are customers judging you? Has that changed, right? Like if they, a year ago cared about like, hey, tracking is going to ruin my CX tickets. Is it now like, oh, what we really care about is that consumers are seeing this page and they might buy something else or do an exchange or whatnot? Like, has that changed? Like, what are you seeing from the market?
Yeah. So like in 2014, 2015, when we were like initially we're building on Shopify platform with our agency, we were working on kind of post-purchase experiences. The audiences that we would tend to engage with were the ops and logistics teams, because they were the ones in charge of managing the customer experience at that point in the journey. And more and more, when this, this more direct consumer, more brand building ethos came to the forefront, I think a lot more CMOs started to care about every single consumer touch point. And so when we went to market in the early days, it was our standpoint was, yeah, this is a consumer touch point. Like marketing typically cares the most about this. And so, we're gonna build our platform to suit that audience, and that CMOs, they care about revenue, right? Over the last few years, that's shifted a lot, where now it's like there are multiple stakeholders within a merchant that cares a ton about this part of the customer journey and actually impacts it in a really big way. So, you've got the marketing teams, obviously they care about brand, CSAT, they care about representation at every single touch point. CX cares about reduction support tickets. Ops and logistics is really focused on like, how is my entire fulfillment network working, not just domestically, but globally. And so it's become more this coordinated effort. And so now when we work with the merchant, like it's a lot like, so like the top level metrics are always like revenue and customer support reduction. Then depending on the merchant and their goals or objectives, you've got a lot of like sub metrics. So like a retention marketer, they're going to care about repeat. Loyalty marketer, they might care about how do we drive more people into our loyalty program. And so like we'll work with them to figure out what's the campaign that makes most sense and how can post-purchase actually manifest that objective and then measure us against that, right? And then if strategy changes internally at the merchant, then we change our goals and then we change how the merchant should measure us and helping them hit those objectives. So, I mean, it's kind of nuanced and it depends on the merchant and what their strategy is, but top levels, those CX and revenue, then bottom level, it's like really dependent.
Yeah. I feel like this entire call is just going to be like, it depends. What are your goals? What do you want out of this? I'll speak for a minute about Loop, but Kyle, I actually think like the transition from like when you co-founded Loop, right? What was the pain that you were solving? And then maybe I can talk about like the pain that we are hearing from customers today, whether we're good at solving it or not is a different discussion, but like what was the pain?
Yeah, I mean, the base premise of Loop 1.0, which we're very far from today, was to make the post-purchase interactions with customer experience that were incredibly manual, repetitive, and painful, make them self-service. And our belief was that would be both better for the merchant, but also far better for the end consumer.
Yeah.
So it felt like a win-win to us. And it was that simple. It was a very simple experience.
By the way, I think Amanda has bad Wi-Fi. We did not kick her out. So just so the audience knows, she'll be back. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot, and the shift, I would say was happening last year, but it's happening much, much more now, is like explicit ROI and explicit ROI tied to revenue retention. Meaning like if the cost to acquire a customer used to be $30, it's now $50, right? Because you just like don't have the same targeting capabilities. Therefore, it is that much more painful if the customer returns and does not exchange or exchange for store credit. And so the focus for Loop, at least in the last couple of years, right, has been around revenue retention for a brand. And it's like you get to save the customer, you also get like the opportunity for repeat purchase. And I've definitely felt like that has been that much more crucial. Like I think the customer service piece, the automation is table stakes, and like you can go get good solutions to just like make it a delightful experience, right? Like we could go spin up a returns company that did that today, like pretty quickly. We've definitely been seeing the like, at least from the operator side, I'd say like primarily from the finance executive side and like even the operations side, like how do we lower our costs and like how do we retain those customers, which it's been interesting. It's a good challenge. I did want to turn to Amanda, but she's not here, so I'm not going to turn to Amanda right now.
I mean, I might add one just operator side perspective that has come about in the last 6 months, just because the consumer's pretty funky, which is assess every tool you're using, consolidate where you can, simplify where you can. If the ROI is not there, reduce the number of vendors you're using. And so that's like a real like mindset. I think everybody should be mindful of as they're thinking about their tool sets. You have to be in the right tools. I
actually want to spend a couple of minutes here, right? So like operating in this environment, because we have a bunch of operators, and I'll restate it when Amanda rejoins. It is a hard environment. There's a chance consumer spending falls off a cliff. Companies either have a glut of inventory or no inventory, right? Depends on where they are in their cycle. Like, did they over order, or like, can they still not get things off of boats if they, manufacture overseas? Kyle, you just gave one insight around like, hey, simplify, consolidate, like keep the main thing. Like, are there other behaviors that you would have? Are there other thoughts you'd have even running into holiday this year, right? We're like 3 months away from holiday, right? Or whatever the timeline is. So you're making decisions today. Like, what would that look like if you were running, let's just say like a $10 or $20 million D2C brand, like kind of in the sweet spot of the audience here?
Yeah. My general take is that we just need to orient on what is profitable revenue growth, right? Like be in the numbers enough to know this is good revenue, this is bad revenue. And, make sure in advance of holiday that you're tight on what that looks like for your brand. It's so different brand to brand. but be tight on what that looks like and make sure you have strong guidelines given what your business needs are. I mean, you explained some really solid ones. It might be the best thing to discount, and that would be horrible for the brand and just blow through holiday to make sure the business is there come next year, right? Of course, that's not ideal, right? Everybody knows it's not ideal. And so I think if you're afforded the ability to operate in an ideal format and you haven't incorporated some solid boundaries for yourself to build profitably, even in this environment, then I think you should reassess. And to me, I think the post-purchase experience is a really big part of that. I mean, you're acquiring customers who are really excited about what you're doing as a brand. You should have differentiated products if you want to be around for a long time. Assuming you do, like, can you tell unique stories in follow-up, I think is a real area to focus.
I love it. Nick, I want to give you space to explore. Again, kind of taking this where you want, but like, if you think about operating in this environment, you think about running into holiday, what do you think the best brands are doing right now? Is it battening down the hatches? Are you trying to like get distance between your competitors? Obviously, it depends on like, hey, are you the 47,000th candle company or the first half days? But yeah, like, I don't know. Like, what you wave a magic wand and you help brands like accelerate through this year. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's all about, this is going to sound so lame and so like obvious, but it's literally just building and prepping a cohort of consumers to then just hammer them with deals for Q4. And so I think it's, for example, I think it's like creating online interactions or experiences that get people interested in you from upper, higher up in the funnel. So for example, if you, I'll throw this link in the chat here. Please. There's a brand that we launched last year called Jolie Skin, and it's essentially a shower head. But what they do is they say, okay, come to our site, run a free local water report. So you put your zip code in, and we'll tell you exactly all the garbage that's in your water that your city lets happen and go through. And regardless of where you are in the intent of making a purchase, it's still very interesting to you, and it's a free thing for them to put together. But now they're able to basically create a cohort of people that then they can message later, whether or not they run a sale, they can at least propose, hey, you were interested in Jolie, it's Black Friday, everybody else is buying stuff, come buy a Jolie. And it's not just that simple, but it's kind of simple like that. It's basically like building your list and then going after them, because when it comes to Q4 and P&G and Unilever have insane budgets to run ads, and they're running them with reach and frequency objectives, which means they blanket Facebook. And we get whatever's left over, and we're paying and we're bidding for that inventory while they paid us a flat CPM in January. The space of advertising gets very competitive if you don't already know who potentially is going to convert. And so if you're going out completely with a fresh, if you're going out to prospect against a fresh audience in Q4, you're going to spend a lot more money versus if you use Q3 to build that audience up and then try to convert somebody who's already somewhere in that funnel in Q4. I hear you.
I want to quickly diverge, and then I want to come back to you to kick off a discussion around community building and then open that up to everybody here. So Teresa, your question around making everything a deal, this is definitively the it depends question, just to be clear. If you are sitting on very limited inventory and you could sell it at full price and blow through it, and you're like stuck because the rest of your inventory is on a boat, there's no need to discount, right? Like, you can go create great opportunities for VIPs. If you're sitting on a glut of inventory, or you, to Kyle's point, like, you literally just need to convert inventory into cash so you can sustain for another quarter or two, absolutely, right? There's never a right answer on this stuff. In my, it is now dated, but like for 9 years when we would run holiday sales, like, we trained our customers to just wait for discounts. And it was, if not the biggest mistake, it was one of the biggest mistakes I made as a brand. That wouldn't be the right answer for every brand. It was definitively like our strategy was just wrong on the D2C side in retrospect, because people would just wait and wait and wait and wait. And like, we got away from, training. Exactly. Like, some brands that make sense, especially if you're a brand, and like we talked about this on the revenue retention side, if you're a brand that is like a habitual purchase, whether, I know there's a comment about subscription or not, you should do whatever it takes to get that person in the door up front. If they don't like the first flavor you sent them, send them 3 more, because like once they become a customer, they become a customer for life. And so like there is so much nuance around here. I do want to come back to the discussion around community because it's happened a couple places. Kyle, it looks like you want to chime in maybe.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to double click into the why behind the, like, try to get out early and talk in and create moments for the consumer that are compelling early.
Yeah.
And Nick was talking about discounts, right? And I think everybody's right to be concerned about training folks, but like we're in a cycle where quite literally the entire world is increasing its prices by 10% year over year. And so if you're a brand that's in a position that they can profitably bring more nicer prices to consumers, this could be a moment for you, right? And it just totally depends on how your unit economics stack up. But I completely agree that, to me, as I look at the back half of the year and this holiday, the why behind why get more friendly is to just be more consumer friendly. And I think folks in the chat are right to be concerned about, like, what does that mean long-term for the brand? I don't think that's to say every holiday for forever, we should be like really running at discounts as the only thing we do. And so I just don't want folks to think that there's one answer, because you can get as creative as you want to get through holiday, but the consumer's expectations are their expectations. So you have to meet them. You have to meet them where they are on some level.
I love it.
In my experience.
Thank you. Amanda, I actually want to turn to you maybe to kick off the community discussion if you're up for it. When you're talking to a brand and you're talking to a brand about their strategy, and like take community where you want to, right? You can dovetail in with loyalty and referrals and everything, but like, how do you get out of the cycle of like, we are paying $50 to Instagram or to Google or to like, how do you get out of the paid cycle and how do you build that sustainably? Nick talked about, look, you build a community in Q3 so you can crush it in Q4, but like, what are the best brands doing, or how do you recommend your brands build? Community. I'm just going to ask the same question 17 times before I say anything useful. I'll start with you, Amanda. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the whole thrust of this conversation being around retention and profitability coming from lifetime value. I think there's a number of paths that, as was just discussed, building out your list, your email list much earlier in the year, and then you have all of these data points means you can not just remarket to them, email them during holiday, but you have all of these data attributes, and you can do things like when you're ready to launch a loyalty program, you have this whole in-house list to start that. But within the site experience too, there are smart ways you can integrate your loyalty program and incentives, like sign up for an account in order to receive free shipping. So, those benefits are tied to something that the brand then gets back and can use to build that relationship. Or having your rewards or loyalty program available within your cart and the checkout process. So what are all those touch points within the site experience where you can call these things out to work smarter for you, so that it's not just email, though email is important.
I love it. One of the things we've talked a lot about is sometimes you'll use a loyalty program like Loyalty Line, whatever it is, right? It doesn't really matter what the tool is, but sometimes you want to confer loyalty status on behaviors. So somebody who's bought 4 times in the last year, or somebody who has spent a certain amount of dollars. Mm-hmm. And I think the brands that are getting more ambitious about not like forcing even the sign up, but creating the like delightful experience, having the sign up, having the person in the program so that they can get free shipping, whatever, is obviously like preferred, but you can still go create those delightful experiences for your quote unquote VIP customers without having them take an action. Nick, I want to turn to you around the community building, around the like, let's step out of like how we're going to crush it in Q4, but like how are we building a sustainable business going forward with like high retention? What are some of the activities that you would drive?
I think it's all about like keeping the brand exciting, and whatever's exciting, people will be attracted to. And if you can make something that's attractive, then, the community forms around it. I also think it's about like, what does the consumer get out of it? So if a brand is let's say you're selling body wash and deodorant. If a brand is making it exciting and fun to get body wash and deodorant, and you get some form of education out of it, you get something out of it outside of just the product, you're going to be able to create something around that, because it's more than just the product that people are going for. Like my favorite brand to think about community is probably SoulCycle, because I am a front row woo girl through and through. But like, like for example, SoulCycle came out with a product, right? Or a new feature or whatever. People would be talking about it, whether or not SoulCycle starts that conversation. And I think that's a great sign of community. I think also community is something that brands look at and say, they like look at it on a marketing roadmap and they're like, okay, guys, Q3, we got to build our community. But that doesn't really mean anything, because there's no blog post, there's no like webinar, there's no article that's going to teach you how to build a community. You either have it or you don't. You either invest in your customers and you give them stuff, whether that's education, whether that's offers from other brands, whether that's just a great experience, or you don't, right? Like even Chubbies, I don't think intentionally created this community of bros who love short shorts, me being one of them. But like if I see another dude wearing Chubbies, or if I'm at the gym, with my Viore shorts on and I see another guy wearing Viore, I'm like, okay, it's like the nod.
Let's go get a
I think
Michelob
community,
Ultra.
yeah,
That's
the
right.
best judgment, or the best thing to know if you have community there is like, is there that head nod? When two Jeeps come to a traffic light and they give that nod, like that's community. It's not like Jeep CMO said, all right, guys, we got to go build a community and we're going to host events and Zooms and we're going to bring in thought leaders and do this and that. It just naturally happens because they give back to their consumers, and their consumers feel excited when the brand, they interact with the brand.
I love it. When I see other people zooming in from a random architectural jungle, I feel closer to them, as I discussed earlier. That's really helpful. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Okay, I want to dive in a little bit more on retention. And Yao, you and I were talking earlier, so I want to kick off with you around attribution. Like we talked about retention. Like, how do you think about attribution across this, right? Like we've talked about all the different channels, all the different tools. Like, how do you know if like what is driving that retention? Or I don't know. Take that where you want.
Yeah, sure. A buddy was joked with me the other week. He's like, if you added up the attribution from every tool in your tech stack, you'd have like 10x the revenue that you actually have in your business. And I think that's like, it's pretty telling, because it's equal parts right and wrong. Like, Kyle, you said this to start with, like, you got to evaluate every single tool in your tool stack and make a decision on whether it makes sense to keep it. And you absolutely have to do that, especially as we enter these times. The other thing is, like, you can't forget how each app kind of like amplifies other apps in the stack, and what happens if you take an app away. So like for our perspective, for shipment tracking, we see, this is kind of wild, 10 to 20% plus of overall site traffic hits the order tracking experience. So it's like, that's a huge amount of engagement. Our thought to most brands is like, okay, given your strategy, what are you going to try to put in front of that highly engaged audience to drive an interaction or outcome that makes the most sense? Many merchants will use other tools in their stack to display content that might be personalized or relevant to that particular customer. Do you attribute a sale that might come from that interaction to us, to the app that displayed that content, to both of us in some way? And I think it starts to get challenged. I feel like operators, and the rest of you could probably talk more about this than me, but operators, I feel a lot for you, because it's super hard. Like, multi-touch attribution is like the holy grail, but it's super hard to get to that state. And so like, how do you then evaluate each individual tool if they all kind of add up to an end user experience that might drive an outcome?
Thank you.
But yeah.
I love it. Amanda, and then Kyle. And Amanda, if you don't have any thoughts on this, like feel free to pass too. When you think about the attribution, when you think about like the different, like anything to do with retention, like through different channels, like how do you how do you deal with this? Like, how do you help brands to identify like what's actually working or what's not?
That's a tough one. Like you said earlier, it's depends on the brand. But I'll sort of repeat what I had said before. In terms of building and tracking repeat purchases, like email is still always going to be the best channel for that. It's where we get our best insights.
That's great. Look, we don't need to get cute and creative when like there's a very simple black and white answer. So I appreciate it. Kyle, I have a slightly different question, unless you want to double click on what Yao said, and then I'll follow up. So go ahead.
Oh, I just do think if you're operating a brand, it's yours, and attribution just got harder for the platforms where you're acquiring all of your customers. It's not the platform's job to go fix itself, right? You're building a brand. You need to figure out what your brand needs to get through. We talked about it earlier. I think a lot of this first party work that's being done is really like impressive and cool, and brands should be looking to build their own perspective. And it's, we look at attribution from everything for the very reason that y'all was talking about so skeptically. I mean, some of these things are overstated by like 10x, like completely on a different page. And so if you can work hard and have the team on the back end that's building your own view of it, I think that that's always the best way to go. Yeah. It's never clean. So the expectation, I just want to set everybody's expectations. I've never seen it be clean. It's a giant, crazy triangulating mess. But at least with that triangulated mess, you're able to make your own brand's decisions, which I think is ultimately what you're doing day to day.
Kyle, thank you. I want to go a little bit in maybe slightly more complex. If you think about the D2C side versus your own brick and mortar retail, or like pop-up shops, whatever it is, and wholesale, whether you talk about like wholesale through Amazon, wholesale through Kohl's, like however you want to take that. How do you think about customer retention, customer journey, the loyalty around that? Like, how did you guys look at that? Because obviously you've had the complex business model.
Yeah. I think it's probably one of the sneakiest and most obvious ways to get around the platforms losing visibility, right? Which is to sell things to human beings in person. Now you're not going to get a lot of information about them, and attribution is even harder / impossible. The experience we've had is that the younger version of myself that was like, I'm never going to sell these things in retail stores was very foolish. And the simple reality is the vast majority of people buy things with more impulse, and the product needs to be in front of folks. In a world where you've done the hard work to build this really amazing brand, like Nick said, that has differentiated products, tells differentiated stories, you're going to be able to live in person if you're already doing some of those harder things, in my opinion. And so we've actually seen our business mix really mix into that, and have seen the whole brand uplift in a really healthy way. So I'm a huge proponent of taking the e-com winning that was happening in an anomalous way in 2020 and 2021, and leveraging it into just a bigger brand, including offline.
Thanks. Nick, any thoughts about offline or wholesale, like as you think about advising? And then Amanda, again, like I know you're focused on the D2C side, but would be very curious for your opinion. Nick, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an eventual path in a brand's journey that wants to continue growing. You could definitely build a fairly solid. Some businesses have built, $100 million business online exclusively, and you probably could do the same. But I think having retail helps you accelerate that. Almost every brand that used to say that they would stay online is now in stores or is trying to get in stores. And a lot of them have been led by the stable. But I would say, I think retail is like getting to advertise on TV. It just unlocks a different level of scale. It unlocks a different type of consumer. The person that goes to your.com, first of all, you have to understand how lucky you are that somebody gives a shit enough to go to your own site versus just go to Amazon and find a competitor. But you get a completely different consumer that's going to come walk in the store and then discover your product. I think it also, I have seen brands go into retail too early, or they get the opportunity from Target to get in, and then they get in and it's exciting to get in, but then they don't have the juice behind the brand that drives the people in and gets the product off the shelf. And there's a lot of things in retail, like for example, if you have 5 SKUs and 3 of them fly off the shelf, but one of them doesn't, to the retailer, your whole brand is not working. And so you might get, lesser beneficial placement next time around, or you might just get pulled off the shelf. But I think eventually every brand should try to end up in retail if they can. You have to be well capitalized, because you have to basically, you have to be your own bank when it comes to these invoices. And you also have to have the demand for people to go in and want to buy the product or ask for the product, or, basically drive sell-through.
Thanks. Amanda, any thoughts you want to jump in on, multi-channel?
Yeah, as Nick just mentioned, at the stable, we have different divisions. So while I am part of the D2C division, we have a retail division that supports our brands launching and succeeding at Target, Walmart. And I can speak to, having worked brand side as well, being able to get sell-through on the shelf. A lot of that is also contingent upon good relationships with your retail partners, in order to find the right opportunities for your brand to have more visibility within the store, be it like end caps or specific promotions, different opportunities to get more eyeballs on the product. And I will say also kind of the D2C retail relationship, we are hearing for some brands who are already selling both online and in store, with the volatility in paid media that we've already talked about in this hour. Some have chosen to keep their budgets flat or drop them a little bit in paid media and actually work more on the revitalizing those retail relationships, because the last 2 years of COVID, while it's still around, consumers are like ready to leave their house and they are shopping more in store. And there's a little bit more predictability in working with some of those buyers. What the retailer is going to buy up front, whereas you don't know how your acquisition spend is going to fluctuate within Q4.
I love it. Thank you. I want to switch to a question from the audience, because I'm going to acknowledge that I'm not cool enough to know the answer, and I lost it, but it's from Marina. Thoughts on customer ownership as a retention strategy, i.e. NFTs, social tokens, DAOs? She's seen this with content creators. Do you think brands will join the movement?
I'm vomiting right now.
Was it that Michelob Ultra that you drank at the gym with the Bjork guy, or what?
Yeah. I feel like there's potential with NFT technology, like the idea that you can have something that unlocks access. It's basically just another form of a membership. I don't think we're going to see in the next 5 years brands using NFTs like, in like an evergreen way. For example, you might see, and I think this has already happened, but you might see an alcohol company that makes whiskey in a barrel for 50 years, right? They might say, all right, come buy this NFT. This signifies that you own a bottle that comes out of this barrel in 50 years. And for them, it's a way to generate cash flow today for an asset that'll be delivered in 50 years. You might also see a world where instead of a gift with purchase, you get a token that unlocks access to something in the future. You also might see a token that kind of acts as like it sits in your stamp book collection. So like, if you participated in Hintwater's Black Friday sale, you have a token that sits in your wallet that says you took advantage of that. But I don't think we're going to see a ton of like Web3 stuff, at least for the next few years, because I don't think there's been a real differentiated purpose or feature that it brings. It's really just a different technology for subscriptions or memberships.
Appreciate it. Anybody have any thoughts that they want to chime in on? Okay. I want to do a couple of quick ones and then give everybody a minute just to share any last thoughts. It is hard running a brand right now, and capital is constrained. Kyle, I'm going to start with you. If you're running a brand today, like where do you go get capital? Can you get capital? Are VCs investing? Are banks lending? Like, what do you do if you need some cash?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the scale of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think relative to a year ago, it's far like 10 times harder. I think when you're looking forward, the next 12 months is likely to be far harder than the last 12 months, right? From just a consumer spending perspective, I think that will hit most categories. And again, this is just one person's opinion. So my natural inclination, if we're talking about brands that are, call it sub 25 million in sales, is to really zero in on how your business is operating and find most of the capital inside of the revenue that you're generating. Now, that's kind of a BS answer, but I might pair something like that, which is a lower revenue growth, higher profitability place on the curve with, I think there's a bunch of kind of cool lending Shopify Capital being one of them, right? Like using tools like that to help through tough times. And so, like, look, if you find your brand in a moment where you're trying to bridge 6 months or 12 months, I think those are unique tools. But I wouldn't go much further beyond that. I don't think.
At the end of my time at Modify,
it's going to be super expensive.
It's expensive. At the end of my time running my brand, when I knew it was
super expensive,
going to be hard, we the day after our biggest sales day is immediately when I took a PayPal working capital, and like we ultimately paid it off, but it was like 540 days later. Like it was insane how long it took.
Really hard.
Yeah.
So I would not recommend, unless it's something that's capital and needed for your business to survive.
Yeah.
That you spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
In the equity markets in the next 6 to 12 months. I think it's going to be really hard.
Thank you. And Julia commented, obviously Shopify Capital and then Pipe. So Julia, thanks for adding that. Amanda, I want to ask you a question. Curious if you have thoughts on this. Maybe the last question. Who owns retention at a brand? Is it the head of growth? Is it the head of marketing? Is it the CEO? Do the other functions come into play? Like, curious how you think about that.
You're on mute.
You were muted. You're good.
Sorry. Yep. So I was. I think maybe Nick touched on this or Yao. I'm not sure, but it's really it's everyone plays a role, and therefore I think having an internal coordinated strategy, especially ahead of holiday, is really needed in this environment. Coming up with goals that can be established across teams to measure how the brand is doing, and if you're meeting your goals, makes sense. And I would really say, if you aren't already using a tool like Gorgeous for customer service automation and visibility into customer profiles, so that when you do have that conversation, that you can delight and learn more about your customer, kind of harping back on that community conversation, that's absolutely something to consider.
Thanks for mentioning Gorgeous. I do want to spend just a minute or two like thinking about, we have a lot of people who are early in their journey. Loop is 100% Shopify focused, so I think it'll be cleaner because I think most of the attendees are on Shopify. I wouldn't be surprised if all were. If we had a friend starting a footwear company, a swimwear company, with like the intent of scaling it, right? Like they really want to build this into a major brand. Like what is their starting tech stack? Amanda, you just mentioned Gorgeous. I'm going to create a forcing function that it is Shopify is like that, the platform. Are there other like must-have technologies at the beginning, or like as you're scaling, like, hey, you're ultimately going to graduate to X, therefore you might as well do it today? Yeah, let's start with you, and then like definitely want to hear from everybody to chime in, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with a lot of footwear brands, and at the stable, we currently work with both Ufos and Noble. I think as the Loop team knows, finding the right fit for shoes is always going to be a challenge. That's like why Zappos came to be. And I think that's where things like fit finders, great return and exchange policies, automated return processes, and great customer service, all the things we've been talking about today, can help not just the consumer have a good experience, but operationally to keep those return rates low to begin with, to optimize profitability. And then I'd say in terms of specific apps, outside of Loop and Gorgeous. Things footwear brands, especially starting out, may want to consider are things like pre-order and back order functionality to calibrate demand and supply. You're introducing new styles, you're a brand new brand, you don't know how well they're going to be received by your consumer. So you don't want to over order inventory, but you also want to maximize those conversions. So Shopify has lots of apps that can help with that.
Kyle, aside from Malomo and Loop and Gorgeous, who we've now mentioned, are there any other like must-haves? I think you also mentioned Klaviyo, so I'm going to pull that off the list also. Anything else that's like...
Yeah. I mean, the only other big bucket that I think is just oriented around driving visibility through your business is some sort of BI tool. At Chubby's, we use Looker. There's so much data flowing through everything that it's incredibly hard to actually make, this data translate to operational decisions. And so however you go about it, we use Looker. Triple Whale is a solution that's floating around out there. There's a bunch of different platforms to make this easier for you, depending on the scale of your brand. But you just have to commit to getting visibility, whatever that means for your brand. And what I don't want emerging brands to do is give up on that, because it's hard and these tools don't talk all that well to each other. Because once you get a clean view, that you can trust, you can make like fundamentally informed decisions.
I think it's really nice to catch lightning in a bottle, and I think that is extraordinarily unlikely. Therefore, like, the closer you are to the numbers of your business, the closer you are to understanding your retention at the 14, 30, 60, 90, 180 days, whatever it is, the closer you are to Yal's point about channels, like, that is the shit that matters. Is like, do you know what drives your business or don't you? And I think that is something that, like, you guys did extraordinarily well. Again, like, reflecting, that was something we did extraordinarily poorly at Modify. And like, there's such a stark difference of like actually knowing what drove versus like, oh, it feels like this is going to work. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Nick, I want to start with you. Any last thoughts, last words? Everybody's also welcome to pass. I'm going Nick, then Yal, then Amanda, and then I'll bring it back to Kyle. So
cool. I would say going into this period where capital might be tight, try to call everybody you owe money to, ask for more time and a discount. So call Loop Returns, tell them you want a discount. Call everybody that owes you money and tell them you need it now. You could use platforms like Settle to put your invoices in, factor it for 2%, and get the 98%, instantly. You could use Pipe to connect your subscription app, and within 15 minutes, you have a wire dropped in your account. You could use Wayflyer, do the same thing. Like, I would definitely take advantage, but also look at how much the real cost of this capital is. There's some platforms like Clearbank where you pay significantly more than you would if you were to go into Wells Fargo. So I would say, do everything you can to optimize your cash flow. And, my golden rule too with marketing in Q4 is everybody's focused on direct response selling and everybody's focused on getting the sale. Try to just focus on solving the question of like, why should somebody give a shit about what you're selling, and education, right? So lead with education versus just trying to get the sale.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, good luck. You got to top that.
Yeah, I want to go before
sorry.
Nick. I need, next time I want to call my shot. Anyways, Kyle mentioned this earlier around like, there's a small percentage of your customer base that's going to drive most of your profits, and that comes from those repeat customers. And so heading into Q4, I would say look at, like, really get hyper dialed into that, what that 20% of your customer base looks like that does buy from you a lot. And understand the characteristics of them, and then lean into that as you plan your Q4 strategy. I think it's really important to drive your business forward with the customers that care a lot about you, and focusing your time and energy. I mean, I'd even Aaron, you said this, get on the phone with some of them, call them, talk to them about their daily habits, where they're going to discover the things that they buy from either you or other products in their life. Gives you a better picture of who they are and how you can build a better relationship.
It was a bad answer until you complimented me, and then you redeemed yourself. Thank you, Amanda. And then if we have time for you, Kyle, you might just get cut off. Amanda, any last words to the wise?
Yeah, I think just, with everything we've seen with supply chain constraints, I'd recommend focusing on stocking up on your hero products, and then within your site experience, featuring those products that are going to have high availability and deep inventory potential. So you're not promoting things that just sell out quickly. And, you're really meeting that customer demand, and then just contingency plans. So also we saw in prior years, carriers causing shipping delays. Have contingency plans for a different carrier, have your promotions and kind of messaging ready with the customer service team on how you're going to address customer satisfaction when those things arise, so that you're well equipped no matter what happens.
I also like the pre-purchase comment you made earlier as well, for like things that are out of stock to still capture that interest. Kyle, you get the last word, and anybody, including speakers, if you've got to drop. I know we're slightly over, so please.
Yeah, I would just like, this has been the backdrop of everything we've been talking about today. Like, don't fight the information that's kind of obvious and out there. The vast majority of people selling things on the internet have too much inventory, and consumers are feeling squeezed. So like, that's the environment you're operating in. That's the environment your competitors are operating in. You could take a contrarian point of view on those. I personally would not. So go into holiday with a couple beliefs that are unique to you and operate against them.
Thank you. Thank you all. This is great. Thanks to the audience for all the questions. I'm as@loopreturns.com. If I didn't answer, I see everybody's kind of adding their email as well. Thanks all. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.